This is tape 17 of the Learning and You series, The Polls.
Why, if it isn't Sally Jenkins, sitting alone on a park bench in the middle of November. That book sure does look interesting. But Sally, aren't you forgetting something?
What do you mean, forgetting?
Well, Sally, it is November the 12th. Shouldn't you be at the polls?
What are the polls?
Well, Sally, the polls are a place where people all over America go once every 2 or so years to choose their leaders. While drafting our Constitution, our founding fathers realized that democracy was the best form of government. But they also knew that democracy was only as strong as the public allowed it to be. So in order to keep democracy strong, they gave every citizen the right to participate in politics by voting for who should represent them in government.
Yes, but what does that have to do with the polls?
Easy, Sally, I'm getting to that, but a little history never hurt anyone. Our Constitution gives us the opportunity to select our congressmen, senators, and even president from a pool of the best and brightest politicians in the entire country. These men represent the hopes and values of their constituency all the way from Texas, to Alabama, to Alaska.
Well, if those are the polls, you can count me out.
Hold on, Sally, I'm not finished. When you cast your ballot at the polls, you can choose whomever you think is the best candidate for your area.
But aren't the outcomes of most elections foregone conclusions, even before the first vote is cast?
Oh no, Sally. In fact, it is plausible, although highly unlikely, that an entire election could be decided based on just a few hundred votes.
How is that possible? I heard that we had a system called the Electoral College, and they're the ones who really vote for president.
Well, Sally, you're partially correct. Let's create a hypothetical situation where the entire election is dependent on the electoral vote of one state. Let's use Florida as our example. It has 25 electoral votes and a fairly evenly dispersed number of Democrats and Republicans. Now let's imagine for a moment that it's election day and all of the votes have been cast. One of the candidates has 246 electoral votes and the other has 267. Florida, with its 25 votes, would ultimately decide the election.
That seems pretty far-fetched, and I'm still not convinced that I should vote. I mean, does it really matter who wins anyway? I've heard that there really isn't any difference between the Democrats and the Republicans.
Now, I understand that not every popular choice may seem like a good choice to you, but choice is what freedom is founded on. Did you know that during any average election there could easily be 10 third-party candidates running for the same office as the Democrat or Republican?
What's a third party?
A third party is a group with different political beliefs than the main two parties in power. In fact, Sally, both the Democrats and the Republicans got their start as third parties.
What do you mean? You're making things up.
No, Sally. In fact, the first two political parties in the United States were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. It wasn't even until 1860 that the first Republican ran for office.
But what does all of this mean for me?
That means that you have a lot more choices than you might think.
But why are choices so important?
Sally, imagine for a moment a world without choice. Imagine the lives of the communists living in the USSR. Imagine living in a world with a ruthless dictator who makes all of your decisions for you. He listens in on your telephone conversations. You have no freedom of speech. And he has no problem arresting you just for looking different.
That sounds horrible. I think you've really convinced me. You've most certainly given me a good reason to vote, but now I need to know how to vote.
Well, Sally, voting today couldn't be easier. all you need to do is register. In many states, that can be done at the polls on the day of the election, or through the mail before the election. Why, in some states, you can even go to the Motor Vehicle Administration and register to vote there.
But then what do I do when I get to the polls?
That's easy too. All you need is a pencil and a voting slip. Simply check off who you wish to vote for and hand it to the election official. It couldn't be easier, and anyone can do it. Well, almost anyone, but not you, Bingo.
You've been a great help, and I thank you. I'm off to the polls now. Goodbye.
Well, I sure am glad that Sally took her civic responsibility seriously, and I sure hope the rest of you do too.
Be sure to watch the next film in the Learning and You series, Rock and Roll, a harbinger of the devil